I'm Lesley Briones, and I'm very grateful to be serving as the Harris County Commissioner for Precinct 4, which is most of western Harris County and has approximately 1.25 million people, larger than 8 US states, and it's just an honor to be serving. I am a former public school teacher, which is why domestic violence, one of the many reasons it means so much to me, because many of my students lived in homes where they were abused and or were witnessing the abuse. I am a lawyer. I was a former civil court judge, so I'm a proud Latina from South Texas, daughter of teachers, and this is one of the issues that means the most to me because it affects so deeply, and it's a multi-generational kind of impact that we need to stop this cycle of violence, and it's a public health crisis that we need to all be doing more about.
Thank you.
Well, one thing I have learned is something that I'm not proud of, that Harris County leads the state in terms of intimate partner homicides. I have also learned that, New York, twice our population, has 10 times as many beds. And as a proud native Texan and as a public servant here in Harris County, these are, facts that are unacceptable. We have 10 community centers and 55 parks in Precinct 4 alone that are county parks and community centers. So we have partnered with the city of Houston and y'all and the state of Texas to bring the educational campaign into the community spaces in Precinct 4. So the I'm okay, are you okay educational campaign that'll have a QR code linking folks to resources is one of the actions we are taking in the precinct, and that was something, it was low-hanging fruit, and we can get those up, and it will be completed shortly. So the main message is we're in this together, and we will survive and thrive together. For those who are experiencing the violence, we are here for you. And we know that some of the most dangerous times are when individuals are leaving their abusers, and it's so troubling to be like, leave, we're here for you. And I recognize that words are words, right? And when you're in those spaces, it's so hard. And so we're here for you. It's okay, there's no shame in speaking up as a victim, and we're here to provide holistic wraparound services and be partners in the journey of healing and of emerging from the abuse. So that's my number one response. I think these public-private partnerships, working across levels of government, working with our faith community and nonprofits and schools, and as a former public school teacher and as a mom, to me it's stopping that cycle, because we know those who have been abused or witness abuse have more likelihood to become abusers. So that's one of the investments of Harris County that I'm really proud of and I'm hopeful about, is the Resiliency Fund focused on the youth who are survivors of the abuse. But I look forward to seeing I hope that we're able to augment what we're able to invest, but at the end of the day, if we pool our resources, pool our commitment, I believe we'll be able to make much needed progress. And I thank you for being on the front lines in your leadership. We're partnering with 19, I believe, nonprofits in the community so that we're getting the resources as close to the individuals who need it, as opposed to county government, right? It's somewhat removed, and so making sure we're being as deep and as multicultural and really focusing on language access and different cultural sensitively framed programs. So I'm looking forward to that. And then meanwhile, working on the law enforcement piece. So I know Sheriff Gonzalez and the whole sheriff's team are very committed to reducing the response times for calls. And so one way the Commissioner's Court has been able to help is, for example, investing in this teledeputy program so that law enforcement officers who are out can respond to violent, urgent calls, and then those calls that are not as urgent can be handled remotely from somebody at the sheriff's office station. And so the folks that are out in the community can respond where they're needed most, because we know that seconds matter, minutes matter in these calls. So we are just thankful for the partnership, because it's going to take all of us to really make the progress we need. Seeing the resiliency of children and focusing on youth gives me hope. And I think it goes back to the teacher in me and the mom in me, but our children, I couldn't agree more, are our most valuable treasures. And so helping all who have been abused and who are surviving, but making sure we're double focused, laser focused on our children, so that we can stop this kind of intergenerational cycle of violence that unfortunately continues. So that's what gives me hope, is that if we really focus on our youth, that we'll be able to make more progress in stopping and healing. And I think the way we're all raising our children, that it is not okay to abuse or to be abused. We must respect ourselves and each other, and so to me the hope is in the education and just the social mores that we are hopefully crafting in the right direction. So I remain hopeful, and these current numbers are unacceptable, right? So we just need to be brutally honest with the pain points, and as relentless in focusing on the solutions. So
beautiful.
Thank you for everything y'all do, and all the groups who are on the ground. On behalf of myself and my team and my colleagues, we're A, here for the community, and B, we want to be learning and iterating and improving together.
Well, I'm Thesha Jenkins, and I am the training director with the Harris County Domestic Violence Coordinating Council, and I have had the amazing opportunity to do work in the field of gender-based violence for almost 28 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
28.
As I reflect on that, for Domestic Violence Awareness Month 24, I think what I walked away with is how important it is to still get the message of awareness out. Because surprisingly, after 28 Domestic Violence Awareness Months, so many people still don't really get what domestic violence is. I hear people being extremely surprised about economic abuse, people's credit being ruined, and them having to choose to go back to an abusive relationship. And I have people at the end of a training or an event that say, I never even considered about economic abuse, not recognizing that having someone, the verbal and emotional abuse, because unfortunately it seems like it has become so normalized. In fact, 28 years in, when I go and I talk with young people, middle school, high school, and college, and when I'm sharing about coercive control, the response is, that's normal. So there's still this myth out there that domestic violence is only about physical abuse. And the reality is, it is so much deeper than that. I'd like to think that Domestic Violence Awareness Month should be 365, 24/7, and that was pretty much my mantra this year, is that it can't just be the month of October, that it has to be 365 days, 24/7, because that's when it's happening. And so the focus for 2025 is really focusing on healthy relationships. It would definitely be start and continue the conversation about relationships. Ruby Payne, who is an educator, and her work is around poverty and learning. And I think we have a poverty of healthy relationships. And she has an amazing quote that simply says, no significant learning occurs without a relationship. And to every system, in our education system, we should be talking about what constitutes a healthy relationship, right? Because what we know is that approximately 1 in 5 girls ages 14 to 17 are in an abusive relationship. So we should be having those conversations about what constitutes a healthy relationship in our schools. With our medical community, we know that there is a correlation between domestic violence and our health. So what we know is that it's also recommended by the medical community that we are doing routine screening. And interestingly enough, we talk about when women go in for their well woman exam, and I've been asking the question, is there a well man exam? So even with men, we should be asking them about their relationships, because whether they may be the person who is choosing violence in that relationship or they are on the receiving end of that relationship, could it have an impact on the fact that they're having heart palpitations, that their stress is out of control? So the medical community talking about relationships. In our faith-based communities, talking about relationship, right? Law enforcement talking about relationships. So when they respond to that domestic disturbance, it's very simply asking, so can you tell me a little bit more about your relationship? So being willing to go a little bit deeper and talk about it in the workplace, talking about relationship, because maybe some of the fact that there is decreased productivity, that you're not meeting your quotas, could it be that you have individuals in your workplace that are in abusive relationships? Because we know that that top executive who isn't showing up the way that they used to, could it be that they are in a relationship where they feel oppressed? So starting that conversation about relationships, not being afraid to talk about it, because that's the only way that we're actually going to create real change. What gives me hope is the call I get from a doctor, because that doctor actually was able to do a danger assessment and to assist her patient in getting the help that she needed in that moment, because of the training and the conversations that were being held in her office. What gives me hope is a call from probably almost 15 years ago of a mother who reached out and said, thank you. Thank you for the work that you and your team did, because we were doing a program with young people talking about teen dating violence and what constitutes a healthy relationship. And her son had been in a relationship that she had been questioning, and she said, he ended it. And he talked about what he was learning in that class. That gives me hope.
My name is Gale Johnson. I'm a captain with the Sheriff's Office. My current assignment is what we now call the Special Victims Division. It also includes, as you know, domestic violence, sex assault, our victims advocates, most important, and then lastly, of course, elder abuse. The sheriff had doubled the staffing for domestic violence and sex assault, which is massive. It's allowed us to do a lot of really good work.
Yeah.
That was awesome. I'll tell you that when I was a lieutenant, I was a patrolman for a long time, and I went to many domestic violence calls, and this is kind of why this is very important to me, doing this job. So going back as a lieutenant, and I was out of the game for a while, it really surprised me how many cases I was seeing with strangulation. And I thought to myself, when did this start? When did this come up? And it seemed like it was more prevalent than not. And whether it was with a tool, with hands, it didn't matter. I was thinking to myself, what is causing it to rise to this level, whatever the disturbance is about, and again, whatever you read in the report, but why did this all of a sudden start popping up? I don't know. To the point that we have a strangulation form and so forth that the DA's office requires when filing charges, which told me this is clearly a problem. And that was probably one of the biggest things that I saw as a lieutenant, messaging. We do a good job. Our partners do a great job. Our media unit does a great job putting it out, but we can always do better. And when we look at it, when Lieutenant Claflin and I were talking about it, it was simply getting our advocates even more involved. But the sheriff he wants to push it to where it's a standalone unit, where we have a civilian manager. I completely agree with that. And the idea behind that is, as you know, with some of the grants that we have, we're very limited as to what we can do with the personnel. But making it a standalone unit and not worrying about the grants so much anymore ultimately is the goal. So for me, looking at it, I think our messaging needs to improve, and that falls with us. And one of the things that we talked about was maybe getting with some of our local sports teams, associations, and putting messaging in the bathrooms.
Yeah.
for domestic violence and who to contact, you know,
Yeah.
our number, HPD's number, that's the most common,
Yeah.
clearly. Maybe having on their electric banners, you know, during intermissions or whatever, or just a standalone banner inside some of these stadiums.
Yeah.
Why not?
Yeah.
I mean, it's going to cost them little to nothing for us to do that. So that was
Yeah.
just one of the things that we were talking about
Yeah.
to help kind of get the message out. One of the things that he has done in a restaurant he likes to go to, they allowed him to post the same thing in one of their bathrooms, the ladies' bathroom, which I thought, man, that's great. I don't know if it's served any dividends, but it's definitely not going to hurt.
Absolutely.
So if we can get it on a larger scale, such as the Rockets, the Texans, and so forth, the Astros, it's a local soccer team, even better.
Yeah.
So that was one of the things that was kind of my takeaway from it. Again, the messaging is what I brought up before. Focusing on that is probably what I would want to look at the most. Secondarily, for us, getting through our cases in a timely fashion. And again, the additional personnel has allowed us to do that. We don't need them sitting there. It's difficult once you lose a victim due to time, right? We didn't contact them in a timely manner to get a hold of them. And we understand why, but it's frustrating for us because we're thinking, man, we could have done this so much better.
Yeah.
So that's probably one of the bigger things that we're able to push on now. We have a large focus on the cases that, as I said, they come in. We don't control how fast they come in, but we can control how fast we review them. And so that's really, for us, that's our focus. Are we going to do something with this? So let's do it right now. And we gauge them as they come in. We know just by reading what's there, the seriousness of it, the way that it's written. And in fact, I have a really good relationship with a lot of our majors, and I was contacted over the weekend about a case that they had. I believe it was a standoff case. Nonetheless, he said, although no charges were filed, he goes, we're going to need somebody to talk to this lady out there. And I said, well, just give me the case number. We'll get somebody in contact with her. That's not a problem. We have to know so we can respond to it. So that's good as well, because as long as our command staff knows, and they do, they'll reach out to us directly, which is fine. We don't need any formal change or anything like that. Just make a phone call.
Yeah.
And we have our frustrations when we read these cases and we know that we've been out there and that, let's say, a charge has been filed. And I'm not going to point the finger, it doesn't matter. But when we're going back out there again because it's the same suspect, and we're thinking, man, we've done this once already. How many times is it going to take? And that's one of the things that I brought up later kind of in my notes is that unfortunately, media is good and it's bad. The good thing is the media is showing this to at least bring light to this. So it's not just, here's what happened, let's move on. No, this is a constant in your face, and I think it needs to be like that. It's not pleasant, it's nasty to see. It's even worse on our side when we see all of it, the real dirty side of it.
Yeah.
But on the flip side, the more you put it out there, the more you make it known. The phrase I have to give it to one of my homicide friends, and that is, we have to be the voice for the voiceless. And that is true. And especially in a homicide case, obviously, but in our cases where we have a victim who is, say, reluctant to come forward, reluctant to cooperate, and understandably why, that's what we're here for. To me, it's very easy. Get help. Don't be afraid to ask. Just our law enforcement does a great job. Our partners, coordinating counsel, great job. No issues there. Our partners outside the bridge and so forth do a great job. Families do a great job helping with the support system, but you have to start it somewhere. We can't help if we don't know about it. As I said previously, help us help you. You've got to make that phone call. If you don't do that, it's unknown. And we talked about previously what the percentages are. So we can sit here and say that we received 3% more calls this time this year than we did last year, and that's great. What calls did we not receive? Was it a one-off incident that just drove somebody to this level of violence? I don't know. Or were there many other instances that just weren't reported to law enforcement? We'll never know in most cases. But I have to think to myself, if our messaging was better, let's just say, or more inclusive to larger areas, would we be having these problems? Probably so, but maybe not to the degree. And really getting the victims to trust us. I get why they don't. I truly understand it. And maybe they've been a victim before, previously. Maybe they didn't have the feeling that maybe they have now. Maybe they didn't get the response that maybe we're trying to give now. I can see why maybe you'd be a little untrusting of the process or the system. I get it. I get it. Unfortunately, as we know, sometimes cases fall through the cracks. It's sad, but I think in just the time that I've been there and working with you, that has lessened, in my opinion. Again, cases that we know about, right? We can only know what we know about. It's the shame, embarrassment. Same thing with domestic violence, and we know that this this covers all different socioeconomic backgrounds.
Yeah.
It's not just one, it's everywhere.
Yeah.
And so you're gonna have that embarrassment, that shame, that what do I do, where do I go? Well, that's what we're here for.
Yeah.
That's why we're here. And we have really good investigators in place and excellent victims advocates in place and excellent partners that help us. So if we can get that out, yes, it's going to increase call volume. I don't care. That's fine. That's what we're supposed to do. That's our job.
Yeah.
But if we can get it on the front end before it gets really bad, maybe we prohibit something in the future. What gives me hope? What gives me hope is that we have really good partners. We have really good individuals who contribute, who help us get the message out, number one. Number two, they help us. We have an excellent support system, and this is not a shameless plug. We have an excellent command staff in the sheriff's office who understands how serious this is. For the sheriff, this is the top priority. It really is.
Yeah.
Every crime is serious, whether you're the victim of a burglary or domestic violence, it's serious to you, right? That's the most serious crime at the time, understood. When it comes to persons crimes or people crimes, I don't want to say that other crimes take a back seat, but unfortunately, these are ones we need to deal with right now. This is somebody who's been affected physically, mentally, whatever the situation may be. Property can be replaced. I don't want my property stolen any more than you do. However, I would rather our resources be focused on this. We are truly blessed over there. And it's not just staffing. We're just blessed by the leadership that we have, our major and our chief, and of course the sheriff. To be able to do what we need to do, to improve our staffing, which he's done, like I said before, and to give us the resources that we need. Nothing is off the table, nothing. Training, no problem, you got it. He has no issue with that, none whatsoever. He's like that on most everything, but especially when it comes to our domestic violence investigators and so forth, nothing's off the table. Go. He's a big proponent of that, which is huge. It's because stuff costs money, right? It's all expensive and it all comes out of our budget, but you have to spend it somewhere, and you have to invest in that resource.
My name is Mary McFadden. I'm the Chief of the Domestic Violence Division at the Harris County District Attorney's Office. My job is to supervise all of the attorneys over the domestic violence, specifically intimate partner violence cases, from misdemeanor all the way up to capital murder level. I've been at the office for 22 years. I started as an intern in our protective order area and have worked my way up through misdemeanor, felony, and now run the area. I think Domestic Violence Month 2024 sticks out because of the consistency of every other year in October. And what I mean by that is we have a month where we raise awareness, where we talk about domestic violence, and what we know though as a community is domestic violence is year-round. So when we talk about Domestic Violence 2024, really what we're saying is, what do we do the other 11 months? So I think in the coming year, with changes that are going to happen in my office specifically, there is hope that we can restart some of the programs that have kind of fallen by the wayside based on a lack of resources. One of those specifically is our cultural outreach program. We know survivors can't always meet us at our location. They can't always come downtown Houston. And so the cultural outreach program goes into the community. We offer the free protective order services, the assessment, and the representation through that civil process. We also can connect with them on a way that is more culturally sensitive, depending on that person's need at that time. So my hope is that, one, we can restart a program, but two, really that our community, again, as we talk about Domestic Violence Month and move away from that, is stop talking about domestic violence. Give us the resources as a community, as a state, so that we can actually tell survivors that they're protected and protect them. We have worked over the last several years through our domestic violence high-risk team to get out of our individual silos as systems, right? The district attorney's office, we have resources. There's specific resources. They're criminal justice resources. Law enforcement has resources, again, very specific to what they do, which is investigations, filing of charges. Those two systems stop at a certain point. And so what we have to do as a community is we have to engage as a group to protect survivors. We have to stop saying, this is mine, right? And say, what can we do to help you and get that help reciprocated? And I think only through the continuation of programs like DVHRT, which of course the Harris County Domestic Violence Coordinating Council leads in 2 areas within Harris County, can these conversations happen? We have to work as an organized group and not within our silos, because that's the only way that we can protect survivors and that we can, again, guarantee what we tell them every day. We say, come to us, and then we aren't able to help. So of course they lose faith in the system and they don't come back when we know the harm doer has recidivized. We have to work together in a cooperative community system and not within our silos, so that survivors of domestic violence trust us and that we're there when they actually come to us and ask for help. So, God, am I crying too? It's hard to have hope right now, because when we look at reports, we see that nothing changes, right? Harris County, highest number of homicides year after year after year. Domestic Violence Awareness Month, every October, year after year after year. So what gives me hope is that at least the partners that are needed to stop domestic violence are at the table. What gives me hope is I think our community recognizes the need. And I can only say, I hope that again, the resources are put into the system so that we can stop the homicides and help survivors.
So my name is Julie Pleasant. I'm a police administrator, and I serve as the Director of Victim Services Division for the Houston Police Department. Well, I was a lieutenant for 26 years, and in February it will be a year as a Director over Victim Services. So I have a little ways to go, but been doing this work for about 8 years now. You know, for me, I think the impact was, and the blessing from my perspective is I get to see success stories. I get to know, and it's a known fact, we are better together than we are alone, right? And I have the partnerships, I know them, I have you, I have other agencies. We depend on each other all the time for assistance with survivors, and to know that we can champion that month together, united, and present the work we do, success stories, and empower those survivors who have made it out, who are enjoying freedom, free from violence, and at peace. I think that is a huge deal for me, and every year I think it increases the passion because I can see more and more of that. And I think we need to do a better job of showing those survivors that are empowered to share their story, because in our line of work, we get to see the bad side, the intervention, the ugly, and we all know it takes 7 to 11 times to leave. So we see all those, but we don't see, once the intervention works, what beautiful sight comes out the other side. We're very blessed in Harris County to have a Harris County Domestic Violence High-Risk Team. Like, to see a case that was high risk for lethality move all the way through the process with all the different advocacy pieces, meshing, warm handoff to prosecutor's office, site visits, on-site visits, really meeting the needs of that victim, and then being able to empower that survivor to share that story, and next year have some of those survivors be able to do that on a platform with us, so all of our partners, even stakeholders, family members, and community members know that there is a way out, even victims that are watching from home, or neighbors who can see there is a way out. Okay, it does work. And that side of us that says, well, they're never gonna leave anyway. You know, we can put an end to that conjecture. and really empower the survivor to talk to others like them and say, it can be done. I made it out. So again, you know, each one of us has an intricate part and a role to play in this, you know, mission to eradicate domestic violence. And I think that the same thing, if you see something, say something, but if you see something good happening, say something so that we can show others, hey, this works. Look what, because what we get caught up in is all the bad and what's happening. And I think lifting up survivor success stories will give a boost, a new empowerment to the mission to eradicate domestic violence. So it is true, we are better together than we are alone. And I think together, every piece of the puzzle, from on-scene advocates to law enforcement, prosecution, nonprofits, our partners and allies in the community, churches, if there's something good, let's replicate it. Let's do it again. Let's hear about it. And I think that is going to help. Success stories. I mean, there's nothing better than, you know, hearing a survivor say, if not for that officer that told me about a community group like, let's say, ABDA, who did legal filings for free, or if not for me being able to get out of the situation, emergency shelter with Houston Area Women's Center, or if not for that site visit from our mobile units with HCDVCC, if not for all of that, I wouldn't be here today. Yeah. And it validates what you do every day. Yeah. And it makes you say, what I do is worth it, and let me tell you why. And you go and you're a beacon of light for other survivors, and you're a beacon of light and hope for officers that are in there day and night going to calls, maybe the 11th, maybe the 7th, maybe the 1st. And they just have to keep that mindset of, I'm making a difference. And when we hear the success stories, we know we are, as we're validating it.
My name is Ronel Golden. I'm a communications advisor, but I'm also a survivor of domestic violence and the author of a book called The Getting Out Guide, a book designed to help victims of domestic violence figure out if they're in abusive relationships and then what to do about it. For me, it was really shocking to realize that most victims do not know what domestic violence means, intimate partner violence means, or what abuse actually means. They don't know if they're in abusive relationships. This lack of understanding what it means is not only a problem for victims, but it's also a problem for family members, for faith leaders, for law enforcement officers, etc., who are supposed to be the support system for victims. And that's the main thing that I realized in this past year. Next year, my focus is on creating ways for victims, potentially people who already know that they're victims, but also for people who are in relationships where they don't know what's going on, where they feel that something's off or bad, or where they may be being screamed at, or they are being hit, or their finances are being controlled. My purpose for the next year is to create ways for them to be able to educate themselves on what domestic violence means, because unless they're able to identify the problem, they cannot solve the problem. And so there are different ways of doing that, but that's what I'll be focusing on in the next year, is to find potential victims, people who know they're victims, where they are, and to bring them in so that they can start learning about what it means. Educate yourselves. Educate yourself on what domestic violence means, what it does to an individual, what some of the signs are. I think that's the main thing that I would ask people to do. go and read about it on a website. Speak to somebody who actually does this work, because once you educate yourself, you can actually start supporting others in the process. The other thing that I would want to say to people is listen carefully. Once you've educated yourself and you think that something might be wrong in a friend or a family member's relationship, listen to what they're telling you, because sometimes the cry for help is very nuanced, it's very subtle. Because people don't really know what it is, or because they're ashamed, they won't vocalize it in the way that you would say, I'm hungry. So I think sensitivity to hear what people are trying to ask you or tell you is really important. And then the third thing that I would say is donate. For people who can, donate to organizations who are doing this work, because this work requires a lot of financial resources. Financial resources are increasingly limited in our society, and anything extra that you can spare, whether it's your finances or your time, I think just get involved. Coordinated efforts to resolve domestic violence. Domestic violence doesn't only have a physical impact on people. It has a mental impact on people. It has a financial impact on people. It has an impact on their environment, because they no longer have a home potentially to live in if they leave. It has an impact on their spirituality, their hopes, and their dreams for the future. So I think organizations like the Harris County Domestic Violence Coordinating Council, there are all these organizations that provide different types of support. And if we can coordinate and we can guide victims where they need to get what help they need, I think that is what gives me hope, because that means that we're not just trying to solve one part of the problem, but we're actually addressing the entire problem fully, so that victims can get out and stay out of abusive relationships.
I am Barbie Brashear. I am the Executive Director of the Harris County Domestic Violence Coordinating Council. I have been working in the domestic violence movement over 30 years, 32 years. Yeah, a long time. I've worked directly with survivors for many years, worked in shelter setting, worked in non-residential counseling settings, and now work in a setting with the Coordinating Council where we're working with the systems to develop a coordinated community response that increases access to services and safety, finds new and better ways of accountability to improve protective factors, and then ultimately working to prevent domestic violence and domestic violence homicides in our community. I've had many years of domestic violence awareness months, many months celebrated, mourned, memorialized. My biggest takeaway every time, and continues to be now, is the resiliency, the courage, the strength of women who persevere, who look for better ways to have lives free from violence. For those who are unable to leave, the courage that it takes to stay, to raise children in homes where it's not healthy. And, you know, I think the last takeaway is no one's ever alone. There are people that can help. And it's our responsibility as the community leadership, as systems and organizations who respond, to make it easier for people to access our services. We shouldn't create services that make our jobs easier. We have to do this to make it easier for survivors and victims to come forward to access our service. I think it's doubling down on efforts to improve how we respond, to be very thoughtful about what is it that we are doing. Is it working? Is it not working? How do we take the resources that we have available to improve that? And then how do we create new resources to be innovative
focused on best practices and really increase access to safety. Thank you. Thank you for not giving up. Thank you for staying in this hard work. Thank you for joining this hard work. Thank you for giving what you can. I grew up in a home where there was domestic violence. I didn't know that it was domestic violence until I got out and was grown and started working in the field. Listening to women share their stories gives me hope. No one has to be abused. This is not normal. This is not okay. We're not alone. And there are people who really care. That's what gives me hope. Today we're here talking to leaders in our community who have all been a part of the efforts to improve how our community responds to domestic violence cases, to domestic violence survivors, to domestic violence victims, to domestic violence offenders, people who are using violence in their own lives. Today has been about what have they learned. It's been a time of reflection. What have you learned? What do you want to do going forward? And what message do we need to continue to send to our community so that we can improve the homicide rate, bring it down, so that we can improve how we respond to families and our community. To me today, this work that's being put out as a video, as a public service announcement, is really about raising awareness. You don't know what you don't know. That's what we learned today from each and every person that spoke. They spoke to their passion, their belief in service, and the more they know, they can, when you know better, you do better, right? I think that's what today's about. Okay. Thank you to all of our partners, all of the organizations and responding systems. Thank you to Harris County Commissioners Court, Harris County Commissioners, Judge Lena Hidalgo, Commissioner Briones, Commissioner Garcia, Commissioner Ellis, Commissioner Ramsey. They've provided vital funding to the Domestic Violence Assistance Fund, to the Early Childhood Resiliency Fund that's aimed directly at improving how our community and how the county is supporting families. Thank you to our domestic violence organizations. There are many that have shelter, non-residential services, 24-hour crisis hotlines. Our community cannot do this work without so many partners addressing it. They're often drinking from a fire hydrant to try to address the needs of our community. We cannot do this alone. Thank you to all of the social service organizations that may not be directly serving domestic violence, but they have survivors and victims that are coming forward. The faith community, churches that are providing vital services when they're in their community. They're also seeing survivors on a daily basis and victims on a daily basis and doing their part. Our healthcare, nurses, doctors, clinics, they're all seeing and supporting survivors. I want to thank Harris County Commissioners, Houston Police Department, Harris County Sheriff's Office, Harris County District Attorney's Office, all of the responding domestic violence organizations that are providing shelter, non-residential services, 24-hour hotline, healthcare providers, nurses, doctors. I want to also thank social service organizations and the faith community that are touching and a part of families' lives every day. This work is critical and important, and we can't do it alone. Thank you. I'm Barbie Brashear. I'm the Executive Director of the Harris County Domestic Violence Coordinating Council. We are here today as a wrap-up for Domestic Violence Awareness Month 2024. We are creating a video and getting input from leaders across the county about what they've learned, a reflection of what worked, what may not have worked, what they want to focus on for next year.